I found the suitcases at the door of my bedroom with a note, "We're waiting outside. We've already sold the house." Just like that. My 3 children, the same ones I raised working 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day, the ones I fed by taking the last bite from my mouth, were throwing me out of my own home. A home I had built with my own hands. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My breath caught as my wrinkled fingers clutched that paper with the cold, calculating handwriting I recognized as my eldest, Miguel's. From the window I could see Lucia's car parked, the 3 of them inside, waiting for me to come out like a dog abandoned on the roadside. 35 years of sacrifice, ending like this. But I would not leave without a fight. They did not know their mother. That scene didn't appear out of nowhere. To understand why those suitcases broke something in me, you have to know who I was before that note. You have to know the small details, the smells, the hours, the shape of the house, and the steady work that made it all mine. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the east side of Mexico City. Our street is the kind where the morning light hits the tiled roofs and the sound of a bakery truck mixes with someone sweeping their stoop. My house is not large. It has 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen that opens to the patio, and a little storefront off the street where I cook. I bought it 20 years ago with money that never came easily. It is a home of chipped tiles, hand-me-down curtains, and a garden of stubborn pots where I coax life from basil and tomatoes. The house smells like onion and tortillas most mornings. It smells like coffee in small cups and the grease of a pan that has fed a neighborhood for decades. The back door squeaks in a way that always made my mother laugh, and that squeak is the sound I heard for years before I learned what betrayal was. The squeak meant I was home, and that the world I had made was steady. I will tell you about the work. I will not dress it up. I started with cleaning other people's houses, then sewing late into the night by lamplight. There were stretches when the only rest I allowed myself was the short time between the ovens keeping warm light and the sound of the roosters. When my young husband died, there were no insurance papers, no savings. There was grief and 3 small faces depending on me for everything. I was 30 and suddenly had to become 2 people, mother and wage earner. I learned to be invisible in the hours when others rested. I rose before the city did, kneading dough while the windows were still dark. I delivered food to construction workers, to clerks, to students who could not afford more. I learned to read the neighborhood's hunger, and how to calm it with a bowl and a smile. I sold tamales on weekends so Miguel could take his exam. I sewed uniforms in the evening so Lucia could graduate. I saved every coin I could for Daniel's first job, the first time his hands held a steering wheel. There was pride in those sacrifices. There was pride in watching them grow, dressed and fed and set on a path I could not walk myself. I paid taxes on that house for years. I fixed the roof when it leaked. I painted the storefront sign with my own hands. I knew every crack in the tile outside the kitchen door. People in the neighborhood knew me by my apron and the way I labeled my orders with small, careful handwriting. They knew that even on the hottest day, I would bring a blanket to the oldest client down the block because she couldn't get out anymore. The house and the fonda, my little eatery, were woven into the map of our street. They were my life. In the mornings, I would open the storefront and stand at the counter as the light widened. The pan would hiss. The radio would play a song my husband liked, and for a moment the grief felt less heavy because I was doing what he and I had planned together, keeping a home. People would come for breakfast. They would talk about the bus routes, about their children's haircuts, about work. I would finish one order and start another, and the world would move in the rhythm we had crafted. I would sit for the smallest second between orders and count the bills in the cash drawer like a mother counting her blessings. You should know I was careful. I kept receipts. I kept maintenance invoices. I had a drawer where the papers lived like small, obedient children: tax receipts, electricity bills, the old yellow folder with the house deed folded inside. I was proud of that folder. It was like a small heart that beat for me in the house. There were also nights I couldn't sleep. The heat of the stove's metal and the ache in my feet and the knowledge that sometimes the profits ended the same day they had begun. I learned to bargain and to say no when it mattered. I learned to let the words, "I can't," leave my lips and mean them. I stopped apologizing for my tiredness. But never, not once, did I imagine my children would use what I had given them as a hammer. When my oldest suggested transferring the title to their names, I trusted him. I thought I was saving them trouble: taxes, paperwork when I would be gone. He spoke like a man of numbers, with a calm voice and the certainty that comes from someone who wants to decide for others. "Mama," he said, "this is to save us trouble when you are gone." He was right about trouble, but he was not right about intent. I signed papers. They were explained to me with legal words I did not fully understand, and I trusted the son who had been a child in my arms. That small legal maneuver, the handover of ink on a day with too many coffee cups and too many worries, felt like a procedural thing. It felt like a favor. I was naive, yes, but I was also trying to be sensible. I thought I was clever with my sacrifice. I thought less of death and more of the practicality that plagues those of us without large estates or banked fortunes. Years passed. The children grew. The house stayed mine in the way that matters: the sound of my satchel by the door, the recipes scribbled in the back of a small notebook, the memories in photo frames. The deed was in their names, perhaps, but I paid the bills. I paid more than my share of the mortgage when the market dipped, because the Fonda needed oil, and because my children needed food on their plates when money ran hollow. I was the one who called the plumber at midnight when the pipes burst, and who negotiated the price for the new stove when the old one finally stopped making tortillas. Possession, I later learned, is sometimes more than ink. There are people who will tell you that handing over formalities is a mistake. There are others who will say I was careless. I say I was a mother, and I believed in my family. I believed that the blood would honor the hands that fed it. I believed that giving was a kind of insurance that does not need legal clauses. That belief is what hurt the most when the note arrived. I want to tell you about the small things that reveal character. The way my daughter Lucia still kept that simple necklace I gave her, a thin chain with a tiny heart that used to swing when she laughed. The way Daniel's knee always hit the edge of the counter when he sat on the stool, just as when he was a child. The way Miguel would smooth his suit and check his phone while he ate, as if the world could be arranged in spreadsheets and numbers. I knew them in gestures. I knew them in silence. I also want to tell you about fear. Not all fears are the same. There is the fear of losing money. There is the fear of losing health. There is a different fear that lives in bones when you sense betrayal. That fear is colder. It sits like a draft in old walls and makes you notice every crack. The day I found the suitcases, that cold had already been in the house for weeks. Here I will pause and confess something small and human. You who listen, if you have stayed this long, are like the women who come in for a bowl and then linger to listen to the radio. I am grateful. I am also asking a little favor. If you like hearing this voice, if this story matters to you, please consider helping a small channel reach 1,000 subscribers. It is a quiet goal, like paying the light bill, and it helps other stories get told. Leave in the comments the city or country where you are listening from. It comforts me to know where my voice travels. I stayed silent for a long time about the signs, even when they came like small mice nibbling at the edges. There were nights I sat with my hands in my lap and told myself it was nothing. I told myself to sleep and to wake and to continue. I stayed silent, but not forgotten. That sentence went round and round inside me until it became a kind of drum. They simply are there when you look down to tie your shoe. I kept tying my shoe and smiling. I want to underline a truth that will follow me through every step of the fight I made later. Dignity is not the absence of scars. It is the decision to keep one's spine straight after the scar appears. I long believed dignity was about endurance. I learned dignity is also about boundaries. The work of a life does not justify its erasure. Let me go back a moment and give you a picture with a door. The small wooden door between the kitchen and the back patio had a chipped top and a faded knob. It was always a little ajar if I had been moving too fast. That door became an image in my mind, half open, a sliver of light. It was the place where I would go to breathe when the heat of the kitchen and the human busyness became too thick. That door was an image of the life I constructed, always a way out for the world, but always anchored in the house. Doors matter. They tell us who is allowed and who is not. They tell us when someone has respect for thresholds and when someone walks through them like they belong there. The door between the kitchen and the patio, small, ordinary, gained weight in my memory. I began to notice whether that door was closed at night or left unlocked. The first time I found it slightly open in the morning and could not remember leaving it that way, I felt a small jolt of worry. The second time I found it with a small smudge of grease on the knob that I did not recognize, I felt a new kind of alert. I did not move fast. I am not impulsive by nature. My decisions are the stuff of slow cooking, they simmer. But the day I found the note and the suitcases, the simmering had already done its work. Something inside me had been heating, an error had been made if they thought I would go gentle into another house, another room, like a shadow. People ask me now, with a softness that carries accusation, why I trusted them. Why I gave away the papers. Why I did not keep the title physically in a drawer marked with my name and a lock. Perhaps I was foolish. Or perhaps I was simply the mother I had always tried to be, generous, peacemaking, trying to protect them from burdens I remembered having myself. Mothers sometimes try to carry their children's problems so their children will not know the weight. That is not always wisdom. In my case, it became vulnerability. You should also understand my values. I believed strongly that respect is earned by example. I believed in honesty and in labor as a kind of moral spine. I taught my children to stand in line, to greet their elders, to pay their debts. I told them that the world gives back in kind when you plant seeds with your hands. That belief is why betrayal felt not only personal but like a failure of the world I had taught them to build. There was, underneath the pride and the toil, a simpler truth. When you give everything to raise someone, you stitch them into the fabric of yourself. And when that fabric is pulled out from under you, the cold shows through. The note at the door was not just words. It was a pair of scissors. I remember the morning after I found the suitcases. I could not sleep. The house felt too loud. I walked through the rooms like a woman checking for ghosts. I sat at my small kitchen table and touched the edge of the yellow folder where the deeds used to be. That yellow folder had become talisman and torment. My fingers closed around it as if it were the last warm thing on a winter night. I endured, but did not forgive, I said to myself then, because the phrase kept me from dissolving into sobs. It was a private mantra, endured, but did not forgive. It kept my shoulders from collapsing. It also began to sharpen my mind. I started to look for allies. People who noticed me, who had been in the business of keeping community for decades. Helena, who owned the stationery shop across from the fonda, was first. She had known me since my husband used to wash plates in the back alley. Helena's hands are thick with work. When she frowned, the lines on her face made sense like a map. She came to the kitchen and sat with me while the coffee cooled. "Gabriela," she said, "you must see a lawyer." "This smells like a trap." She said it simply, with no grandiose rhetoric. There are things in law that protect us. Injustice is not a way to handle family. I felt nervous to speak of lawyers. I had always thought of legal things as heavy and distant. But the more I thought, the clearer it became that paper had already been used to try to steal my life. Paper could be used to fix that. The idea of using the legal system, of turning the instruments that had been used against me into shields, gave me a strange calm. It was not revenge. It was preservation. At the same time, I had to protect my daily life. There were customers who depended on my food. There were bills that arrived like clocks, immutable. I could not simply close the door and hope for justice. I needed to be practical. I began making lists, as if creating a grocery list could be a form of gathering courage, contacts, receipts, witnesses, moments that could be corroborated. The work of building proof is itself a kind of quiet courage. It is sitting at a table with receipts spread like bones and saying, "This proves I paid, this proves I managed." It is knocking on a neighbor's door and asking them, gently, to remember if I had been the one paying the electricity bill. It is asking your regulars in the fonda for a simple statement, "She is the one who cooks every day." It is slow and small and patient, and it is the opposite of the sudden drama my children had attempted. Their world had favored quick fixes. Mine would favor a patient, methodical truth. When I started that work, I felt less alone. It did not solve everything, but it kept my hands steady. People began to come forward, neighbors, clients, the old woman who lived down the block and had known me since I purchased that little tile house. Their voices were small but firm, like a chorus. "She fixes the roof," someone said. "She has paid the taxes for years," another said. Each small affirmation was like a brick laid back into place. And still, beneath the paperwork and the practicalities, the wound of betrayal throbbed. The most bitter thing was not the loss of legal control, but the realization that what had been taken from me had been turned into a commodity in their minds. My life had been priced, divided, and labeled. They had made me an item to be moved. That knowledge was more painful than any monetary calculation. I tell you all this because it matters how a woman of my age sees the world in the moment before she chooses to fight. I could have chosen to leave quietly. I could have taken the money and gone to a place where no one knew my name and perhaps been swallowed by anonymity. Many do. There is no shame in choosing safety. But something inside me insisted otherwise. The house was not only my roof, it was the archive of a life, of labor performed and receipts stamped. I had a duty to myself, and to the story I had made with my hands. The morning I decided to act, I walked to the little wooden door half open, familiar, and I closed it. I turned the knob and felt the cool bite of metal. It was a small, private act. I stood there a moment and thought of the years of waking before dawn, of the casseroles, of the small hands I had guided. I whispered to the empty kitchen, "Not today." I was not naive to expect that the road ahead would be easy. But the decision to stop being a mere witness to my own life was the first real step toward reclaiming it. I had been erased by what I thought was generosity. Now I would insist on my presence. The next Sunday would be the one that showed me who my children were when faced with a decision that favored them. I would bake child's rellenos, the recipe my mother had taught me, and I would set the table as always. I would keep the little folder within sight. They would speak as if everything were ordinary. But ordinary had already changed. I waited at the table, and the storm was not yet visible. The calm before it felt heavy. I did not know everything that would happen then. I only knew I would not stay silent. The next part of the story begins with a family meal. It begins with a smell of cumin and roasted tomato and a look that I would not ignore. A few months before the suitcases and the note, life looked ordinary from the outside. He had that suit on that always looked slightly too new, as if it had been bought to make an impression. He kissed my cheek with that formal air of a man with responsibilities. Lucia came carrying a cake, her hair pulled neatly back. Daniel walked in last, a little disheveled as always, with that restless energy in his step. Their greetings were warm but already edged with a certain adult politeness, a distance that had been growing slowly, like moss on a stone. We sat. I served the chiles. The house sounded like it always did when children and talk combined, the clink of cutlery, the hum of little voices, the creak of the rocking chair. I filled the youngest grandson's cup and told him the same silly story I had told him when he was a baby. He laughed in the same place my own children used to laugh, and the sound is something that anchors time. Then the conversation shifted. Miguel mentioned casually, as if it were a small breeze that would pass, that perhaps it was time I thought of resting. "Why don't you retire, Mama?" he said, smiling at me while he cut his portion. "You should take it easy. You deserve it." I tried to answer light-heartedly. I said what most mothers say to avoid making waves. "And how do you think I'd live, hijo? My pension won't cover the rent of my own memories." That produced a sympathetic glance or two, and then Lucia, who had a quiet voice but a determined look, suggested, "Why don't you sell the house? It is too big for you alone." I laughed that laugh you laugh to keep things from getting harder. "Sell my house?" I said, waving the napkin. "I plan to die in my bedroom. You all were born there." It was a joke and the table laughed, but my eyes caught Daniel's. He didn't laugh full out. He had that half smile that looks like someone trying to keep a secret from a room. Micro moments piled up. Patricia, Miguel's wife, kept rearranging her napkin and looking at the windows as if the birds outside had news. There were little shifts, the way Miguel's hand hovered on the edge of the table, the way Lucia's eyes darted to Daniel. They were small things that, at the time, I explained away as normal adult behavior, noisy and homely. After dessert, during the coffee, I went to the drawer where I kept the yellow folder with the deed, the medical cards, the small things that are the paper skeleton of a life. I thought it would be nice to show my granddaughter what a school note looked like from decades ago. I pulled the folder and set it gently on the table between a plate with crumbs and a child's toy car. I didn't notice the way Daniel's hand stopped mid-reach when the folder appeared. I did not know that his eyes had fixed on that yellow paper like a man who had just located something he had been told to find. At the time, it was only a small domestic moment. I was teaching a child how to point to his name in a school document. All of this, in retrospect, reads like the prelude to a scam. At that moment, it was only my life shared with the people I loved. We finished coffee. I put the folder back in the drawer afterward, folding the receipt for the new gas regulator on top like a thin, careful shield. It did not cross my mind that those papers were already part of a plan. You don't always see the rope being tied when you are the one holding the strings. There were signs, though, if you know where to look. The first was Miguel asking, later on, to keep some documents. "Better in my safe at work," he said. "Robberies are common." My hands already knew to trust him. I handed the folder over, as any trusting mother might. I thought of it as help someone to hold my papers with the same respect I had for them. It made sense. I believed him. I trusted him. Another sign, Lucia came by the house with boxes. "For organizing," she explained, and she began to stack them in the garage. She said she would help me tidy up. She took some family portraits to digitize, and I heard the click of her phone as she photographed them. She said she would be so careful. Her fingers trembled in the way they used to when she was a child during a recital. I watched her and thought, sensible daughter doing sensible things. Meanwhile Daniel, with his casual ways, started telling me about a retirement home his girlfriend's aunt worked at. He described a courtyard with a fountain and activities in the morning. "You wouldn't be alone," he said. "They have music on Wednesdays." He said it in that easy tone of someone offering a convenience. It sounded nice on the surface, the kind of thing adult children say when the thought of caring for someone becomes heavy. That Sunday afternoon contained all the banalities that make a family ordinary, the small kindnesses and the small selfishnesses. There was also a neighbor named Sylvia who came by with her little chihuahua and the kind of curiosity that is a neighborhood's weather. Sylvia peered into the open window and made a small joke to Lucia. "If they move you to a nicer place, you will send me the receipt for the cake you promised." Sylvia's comment was trivial, but it carried an undercurrent: gossip. The neighborhood watches, and sometimes their watching turns to intervention. For me, Sylvia's teasing was like a small insect. It buzzed around the ear of the day and left a tiny itch. Walking through the day, I felt an uneasy fog settle. Small things, yes boxes, phone clicks, offers of a place to stay coalesced into a pattern. I am not proud to say that I shrugged it off. I wanted, for the sake of peace, to believe that my children loved me in the way I had taught them to love. A mother's optimism is also a kind of armor. It protects by letting us see the best. I told myself again the phrases I had repeated for years: give, forgive, maintain harmony. These were my mantras. I stayed silent, but not forgotten. I said it in my head to still the tightening inside my chest. That quiet slogan kept me from causing a scene at a table that, after all, was our home. Yet, beneath the routines, a current of calculation rose. People I had known for decades rattled off little warnings. Senora Estella again, passing by with her umbrella, said between her teeth, "Watch your papers, Gabby." That was the second public caution, and it lodged in me like a splinter. The house continued to breathe with life. Customers came into the fonda that week and joked as usual. Mr. Alvarez from the bakery told me his grandson had passed his math test. The radio hummed in the corner. Life had layers, and the top ones were pleasant. The food was cooking, the plates were returning to the sink, the laughter of a child was a familiar chord. But some nights, when I turned the key in the little wooden door and closed it, the house felt smaller for reasons I could not name. I would look at the living room and imagine the suitcases. It seemed impossible. The idea of being moved like a piece of furniture was a concept as foreign as being eaten by a beast in the street. Yet that unease took root. There were moments of micro-conflict in those weeks. A neighbor, Tomas, who had always been helpful, dropped by and said, "You could rent out that storefront and live somewhere cheaper." He said it as if it were an obvious solution, but the weight of his words landed on me like a suggestion that there was something wrong with me for wanting my own house. A passing comment by a teacher friend, "You know, Gabriela, sometimes family decisions need to be practical, not sentimental," felt like a blade disguised as concern. Then one afternoon in the market, a vendor who knew me nodded and said, quietly, "I heard from Miguel's office they are looking at properties in our neighborhood." His voice was small, the kind of voice that meant he did not want trouble, but his words drove a nail into my growing suspicion. The micro-conflicts multiplied: an indifferent remark, a neighbor's half-joke, a suggestion that I should be practical. They were small pricks, each one a test to see if I would flinch. I tried to shoulder the discomfort. I kept working. I served a man his lunch and laughed when he told me his granddaughter could now ride a bike. But at night my hands trembled when I folded laundry. A light inside me, that had been steady for decades, flickered. The family seemed unaware of the battle forming within me. Or perhaps they were aware and chose a different position. Miguel, with his neat suits, continued to check his phone. Lucia, with her controlled gestures, maintained a pleasant conversation about school activities. Daniel carried on. When I opened it, my hands shook. A note from a notary confirming an appointment to finalize a transaction. I read the few formal lines and felt cold. It might have been a clerical error, I told myself. It might have been the mailman. I put it down on the table and tried to think of nothing. That night, I heard voices in the yard again. I moved to the window and saw them, 3 shadows, talking about closing, buyers, and a date that made me feel faint. They thought I was asleep. That is when I realized the shape of what they had planned. The house, the place where my hands had worn the handles and the pots and the chairs, had been reduced in their minds to numbers on a page. I stood by the window with my hand on the frame of the door. The wood was warm from the day's sun. The house breathed around me, familiar and tender. I thought of the photographs, of the child's, of the yellow folder sleeping in its drawer. I thought of the life made by small, consistent acts. My heart tightened in a way I recognized not as a simple fear but as a call. The very next afternoon I walked into the sitting room where they had been gathering and I asked, calmly, "What do you mean by selling the house?" The air tightened. Glasses were set down with more intention. Miguel cleared his throat. Lucia's hand twisted the chain at her neck. Daniel avoided looking at me. Their answers were a tangle of supposed good intentions, security, comfort, less work for you, but their faces had that new hardness, the look of people who believed in their plan. They said it as if it were already arranged, as if the fact that paper bore their signatures nullified the rest of the life. They spoke as if I were a problem to be solved. For the first time in a long while, my voice sounded different to my own ears, firmer, thinner, not the muffled softness I used to offer. "You did this without asking me," I said, letting the words fall like stones. "You sold what is mine without my consent." They mumbled. There were excuses. There were rationalizations. There was a silver thread of guilt in Miguel's eyes that flickered and then was gone. That was the moment when the quiet domestic life I'd held on to forever shifted. You could feel the track being laid, from ordinary Sunday to something else, a confrontation that would cleave our family into before and after. I sat at the kitchen table and felt the weight of my life settle on the laminate top. The sunlight through the lace curtain painted lines across the paper I had placed there that afternoon, receipts, the envelope from the notary. I realized then that the life I had built with my hands could be treated like furniture, moved, sold, assigned a tag. A door had been left ajar for years, and now it would have to be opened all the way. The next steps would be hard. They would involve cold rooms, cold letters, and the slow process of turning law into protection. But as I looked at my children, at their expressions, at their hurried justification, I felt a kind of steely resolve. The house was a house of memories, and I would not let it be catalogued without my say. The air felt different then, charged, inevitable. My voice, when it came, was not loud, but it carried, "You cannot treat me like a thing." There was silence, then a string of defenses, then, briefly, the force of a plan crumbling in their eyes. I did not know yet the battles I would have to fight, legal forms, witnesses, measures that would force their hands. But I knew the truth of what had been done, and that knowledge made my next choice clear. They thought I would cry and go. But some things in me had hardened into purpose. I would not be moved. I would not be invisible. And yet I was only at the edge of what would come. The folder on the kitchen table hummed with possibility. I touched its corner and the paper was cool. I pushed back my chair and stood up. I would not go quietly. There were signs, small and domestic, and I kept folding them into explanations so I could breathe. I felt a prickle at the base of my neck. I went to the kitchen and found Miguel's shoes by the sink, loosened laces, his suit jacket thrown over the chair as if he had left in a hurry. I told myself he was tired. I told myself nothing. He asked me, one afternoon, to keep the papers with him. He said it like a favor. He said it like a kindness wrapped in certainty. It's better in my safe, Mama. There are many robberies. I handed him the yellow folder because I had handed him everything else for years: trust, recipes, the sound of my voice at bedtime. His voice was calm. His fingers were steady. The folder left my hands as if it were a light thing. Lucia began bringing boxes. They were clean, new, the kind you buy in bulk. She stacked them in the garage with the same careful movements she used to fold my shirts when she was a girl. "I'll organize for you," she said, smiling. Her hands trembled when she touched the old photographs. "I'll digitize them so they don't get lost," she promised. She carried some albums away in a soft pile and closed the garage door like someone tucking away evidence. Daniel started to tell me about a lovely home for retired people. He described a courtyard with a fountain, a room where they did crafts on Friday afternoons, gentle staff who would help me to stand. He showed me pictures on his phone. The phone looked like a tiny altar in his hand, and he kept swiping as if the images could soften what he was planning. "You wouldn't be alone," he said. "You'd be safe." I looked out the window at my plants, at the basil I had coaxed through drought, and I answered, "I have life here." He nodded as if that was a quaint argument. Small things started to go missing. The porcelain plate my mother left me vanished from the shelf. A necklace thin, with the small heart I had given Lucia, was in a safe place. Photographs that had hung in the hallway were reboxed, explained away. When I asked, their voices offered reasons the way rain offers excuses for a leak. "We're keeping it safe. We'll fix it. You misremembered." I listened and swallowed 1,000 tiny betrayals. One afternoon, while I stirred the pot and listened to the radio, I caught Miguel in the kitchen on the phone. He leaned close to the counter, eyes closed, whispering like a conspirator. "The appraisal came in higher than expected," he said, low enough that I pretended not to hear. "We could close in a month." "Yes. She doesn't know yet." He laughed once, a sound like someone stepping on a brittle leaf. When he saw me, he smiled the way a man does when he is caught in a small wrong and must pretend it was nothing. "It was work," he said. His face did not line up with his mouth. Neighbors became small weather reports. The market vendor Don Omar pulled me aside and said something in a voice that scratched my skin. "I heard from Miguel's office. They're looking at properties." He said it as if he were telling me the weather. Sylvia from next door made a joke about my upgrading to a fancier place and looked away too fast. Senora Estella left empanadas with a face like flint. Her warning was not loud, but it cut deeper than gossip. "Gabriela, watch your papers." Her hand closed over mine like pressure. I began to test their kindness. I asked Miguel for the folder back and he hesitated, thumb rubbing the crease in a document like someone erasing fingerprints. "It's safer there," he said. Lucia offered to help clean and took the albums. Daniel kept circling my living room as if he were mapping exits. Each answer was a little story designed to soothe me, to make me believe I was the one being cared for, not curated out. An odd thing happened one morning. A caller asked for Miguel and I told him he wasn't home. The man, his voice thin with official paper, said there was a meeting at the notary's office. "Finalize the operation," the man said, and the words felt like a lock turned slowly in a door I had left ajar. I put the receiver down and I heard the house differently, like a room where furniture mutters its own secrets when you're not listening. I stayed silent, but not forgotten. They brought strangers. Daniel's friend came to measure the storefront and commented on remodel possibilities. They spoke of investors like they were naming colors. The friend whistled through the back door where my soup pots hung and touched the. Miguel dismissed her with a look. Why bother? It's done. Daniel puffed, worry stitched around his eyes. What if she refuses to leave? Miguel's answer was colder than the tile beneath my feet. She won't have a choice. Legally, it's over. I froze, my hand on the knob of the door I had always used to step into daylight. The words fell into me like cold rain. My grip tightened. I could pretend ignorance a little longer. I could pretend kindness was the only language left between us. But the air tasted different than metallic, like a coin newly struck. I opened the door. The patio smelled like soap and lemon, like the afternoons when the sunlight held dust motes like prayer. My hand still clutched the knob. I let go and walked outside because the house had been too quiet and the quiet had mouths. They jumped, small and guilty, the way people do when a curtain is pulled back on a stage. What is sold, Miguel? What is sold? The words tore out of me without permission. My voice sounded like a stranger's echo. They looked at each other. I saw the tiny, almost gleeful trauma in Miguel's smile, as if he had practiced indignation and found it useful for the day's work. Lucia's face tried to be soft around the edges, but her fingers worried the necklace she'd never take off. Daniel had a look I had seen in adolescence, impatient, like a boy who wants a train to leave on time and everyone else to move. Miguel spoke as if reading a script. Mama, we did this for you. You gave us the house. You told us to keep it so you wouldn't have problems. We only followed what you wanted to avoid when you're gone. His hands were folded. He used the word we like a shield. He said, we sold it, with the sterile softness of someone who has decided to sterilize love into an asset. Lucia said, it's for your own good. We found a nice home for you. Daniel added, less work, more care. Costume language for dispossession. I went silent. Their words hit the bones and ricocheted into memory. Nights without food so they would not go hungry, hands bleeding from work, the stove's iron warm beneath my palms. My hands calloused from dough and knives reached for the table. There was paper on it, a thick packet with a notary's seal, ink still glossy. The contract sat like a thing that had swallowed the house and was still breathing. I took the papers with both hands because I did not trust my voice. The contract's type was corporate and clean. The signatures were 3. My name was there too smaller, as if printed by someone trying to shrink an animal into its cage. The numbers were dizzying, 3 million pesos. I read it again, the way you read a recipe to convince yourself flour can be measured. There was a clause that made my stomach fold, 30% for relocation of the mother. 3 words arranged like a polite shovel. My fingers trembled so badly the paper shook. My mouth tasted like iron. Lucia came forward with the air of someone offering a bandage after pulling out a nail. Mama, it covers everything. And the rest is split. Her eyes did not meet mine, she looked just past me. Daniel, impatient, let the mask slip. We've already arranged the place. You won't be alone. His hand on his hip, his face just a notch away from contempt. It's practical. This is my life, I said, and the house seemed to listen. My voice was small and then, finally, clearer. These walls, this signboard, these pans, my hands on the stove, this is my life. The words came like a sentence I had been saving to use on the right day. They had all the meanings of a lifetime packed into 10 syllables. You sold it. You sold my life. Miguel's answer was economic, like someone reciting a balance sheet. Legally, it's been in our names for years. We're just monetizing what we own." He kept his hands very still as if stillness made his words truer. You could hear the clock in the kitchen. It ticked like a verdict. I remember how my body betrayed me, legs gone soft, a wave of heat that was not anger but a deep, animal grief. I clutched the corner of the table as if the laminate might hold me. I thought of the recipes scribbled in a notebook, of the photo of Miguel on his graduation day with my proud smile behind him. I thought of the night stitching uniforms by lamplight and the time I sent Miguel money for tuition from a week barely fed. The history of my body and my work pressed into the paper like a watermark. They tried to wrap it in reasons. You were tired. We're protecting you. You said to avoid complications. Each excuse was polished, rehearsed. I could see the architecture of their plan: move things gradually, soften the edges, create a new normal built on the rubble of what I had done. I did something I had never done before. I laughed, not a soft maternal laugh, but one that sounded like glass tapping against tile. Protect me? I asked. Protect me by selling the table where I counted the day's money? Protect me by selling the storefront where I greeted people by name? Is that protection? They flinched. Lucia's jaw clenched. Daniel looked away. Miguel read his lines faster, as if speed could outrun guilt. You don't understand the financial picture, he said. We're helping you in the long run. I picked up the contract again and felt the weight of ink. I had always thought of legal documents as dry things, not living decisions. The smell of the paper was the smell of betrayal, official, varnished, final. There were signatures, notations, a buyer's name Ramirez typed with the same calm one uses for closing a sale. The notary stamp was heavy and real. I asked one question. It should have been a simple question of fact. Who signed for me? Silence widened across the patio like spilled water. My children shifted under it. Miguel cleared his throat, then said, You did, Mama. Years ago. We only made it final. The paper blurred as if someone had smeared the ink. I remembered that day 10 years ago, the notary's office with its bright light, the feeling of trust as I signed, trusting their hands. I had signed, yes. But I had always paid the bills. I had always fixed the stove. I had continued to be the life of the place even when name had changed. Possession, I thought, matters. Get out of my house, I said then, and the voice was a blade through velvet. It was not a yell, it was a command. My body had found a balance between sorrow and boundary. Miguel's face tightened. Technically, it's not your house anymore, Daniel muttered, as if the legal fact could blunt the moral wound. That was the moment the river changed course. I could have dissolved into the ache. I could have allowed their logic to be the stronger force. The house that had been my archive of love suddenly read me like a ledger, and I felt something that was not only broken but also sharpened. I walked away from the table and into the night. The air was heavy and the Mesadora creaked, old wood remembering lullabies. I sat and cried until there were no tears left, until sobs were small and dry and my hands knew only the memory of the rhythm they had once made to rock infants to sleep. The night felt like a long, thin thing, stretched tight. I told myself what I had always told my children when they learned harshness: stand straight, tell the truth, keep your hands clean. But that night there were no lessons to hand out. There was only the cold, long road ahead. Eventually, I folded the contract and placed it in the drawer where the yellow folder used to be. The paper lay heavy like a stone. I could not sleep. I got up at dawn and walked the house, touching the counters, the stove knobs, the places where my hands had left a shape. Memory burned like a stove element under skin. I stayed silent, but I was not forgotten. I would not go quietly. The Messidora remembers you by the squeak it makes. I sat there for hours, rocking with no rhythm to it, listening to my own breath and the house settling down. I had not seen that some weights are carried not to help, but to be taken advantage of. The second night after the discovery, I sat at the kitchen table with the lights low and spread out my receipts like a fan. I started to make lists in the way I always had: what I owned, what I paid, who could testify that I had always run the fonda. I wrote the dates I had paid taxes, the license numbers, the names of regulars who could speak to the fact that I cooked every day. The paper became less an object and more a battalion. Memory became proof. Proof became a plan, slow and careful. I made a map in the margins of my notebook: calls to make, neighbors who owed me favors, people who knew things. Helena's name was at the top because she had been a witness to the whole life of the street. Estella's name was there too. Her daughter's story had been a blueprint for what might be possible. I wrote Javier next because her cousin's gentleness had a specific usefulness. My handwriting grew steadier as I filled the page. I also began to notice details I hadn't before. Little things my children assumed were theirs by right: the new gas regulator I had paid for last winter, the invoice for roof tiles, the sticker on the register from the supplier who had given me credit because he trusted me. These things were breadcrumbs. No one who looks can claim a whole kitchen if they cannot prove they ever bought the salt. Night blurred into morning. I made tea and stood at the stove like someone preparing for an exam. The neighborhood slid into the day: the baker's truck, Mr. Alvarez's laugh, the radio humming the same old songs. Customers filtered into the fonda as if nothing had changed. One man, Rogelio, sat and said, "The tamales are as they always were, Señora." His presence was a kind of testimony. The daily life continued because of me. At midday I called Helena. Her voice on the other end was a hammer and a soft towel at once. "Come by," she said. "Bring all the papers you have." I did. I went because for the first time in a long while I felt a plan notch itself into place. Grief and fury had turned to a managed energy. It was a feeling like cleaning a wound properly before dressing it. I started to catalog everything: receipts, photographs, testimonials, customers willing to sign statements. I learned the legal words from Javier's patient explanations: possession de facto, abuse patrimonial, measure cautelar. He explained that even if the property was in their names, the fact that I had paid the bills, maintained the house, and operated the business could mean the transfer was suspect, especially if manipulation could be shown. He spoke slowly, his fingers steepling, words like careful instruments. "We can act," he said. "But we must be methodical." Methodical suited me. I took pictures of my handprints on the counter, of the receipt dates, of the photo where Miguel's small hand was held in mine at his graduation. I recorded short videos: me preparing a dish, me at the register answering a regular by name. I asked neighbors if they would write a sentence. Most said yes. The old woman down the block who had known me since the day I bought the house wrote a letter that smelled of lavender and certainty. I also did safer, practical things. I changed the locks on the house and the storefront in the first light of a morning when they were still asleep. I hired 2 of Helena's nephew's young men who knew how to lift and how to keep reasonable distance to help me. The act of changing a lock felt sacred. The new metal clicked with a firmness that had an almost audible moral weight. I investigated quietly, with the plodding patience of someone who had balanced a life on small accounts. A friend at the accountant's office helped me trace the payments. Miguel and the others had signatures on documents, yes, but accounts showed where money had flowed. Every cent that had come from my pocket had a trail. I made copies. I labeled folders. I made sure nothing was left to the mercy of memory. There were nights when fear crept in. I imagined them coming with threats or with legal languages I did not yet know. I imagined strangers at my door. But I also pictured ballots lined up, receipts, witnesses, Javier's letters. I pictured the buyer, Mr. Ramirez, being told the house was embroiled in a dispute and thinking better of hardship. I pictured a legal clock forcing haste upon my children's plans. I practiced small things in my head, what to say at the table, how to keep my voice steady. I rehearsed the moment when I would show them the file, when I would place a paper on the table and refuse to have it moved again. I imagined myself as the woman who runs her life like she runs her kitchen, with order, respect, and the right to be consulted. But this was not only about law. It was also about dignity. I found a sentence in the privacy of my mind that I would make into a mantra: I will not be erased. I said it, and the words were both a promise and a prayer. It lined up in my chest like a backbone. At dawn one morning, I made coffee and set out the tray as if to offer civility. I had a folder of everything we might need. I placed it in a place where the light would hit it and made the house ready for the conversation I could not delay. I thought of all the years I had given them a roof without demanding this kind of gratitude. I thought of the clarity now settling in me. I would give, yes, but I would not be diminished. I picked up the phone and called Javier. Then I called Helena to say I was ready. I breathed in the smell of coffee and the faint scent of onions frying. The house listened. My hands were not the same hands that had been so used to smooth over things. They were hands that could hold paper, sign, and defend a life. I decided I would fight. I picked up the phone. I moved quietly like a woman who had learned how to fold her panic into tasks. My hands still shook, but the shaking had a purpose now. I gathered every paper I could find and spread them across the kitchen table where the morning light would not lie. I felt the house with my fingers. Receipts, invoices, licenses, the faded municipal permit, tax stubs with my scrawl, a sticker from the supplier who trusted me on credit. Each sheet was a small, stubborn proof that I had been the one to keep this place breathing. I sorted them into stacks: taxes, repairs, purchases, customer ledgers. The stacks made a sound like order being born. I called Helena while I worked. Her voice was a warm thing in my ear, sharp as a knife when it had to be. "Bring everything," she said. "And don't tell them you're doing it." She understood the secrecy like it was another kind of kindness. I wrapped the folder in a worn scarf and walked to her papeleria with the early sunlight under my shoes. Helena's shop smelled of paper and coffee and the exact kind of gossip that helps you survive. She handed me a cup without asking and watched me arrange the documents on her counter. "They can't say you didn't take care of the house," she said. "Not with this." Her certainty steadied something inside me. I repeated the things I had always told them: keep your hands clean, tell the truth. Now I needed those words for myself. I found Javier in an office that smelled of lemon cleaner and old leather. He had the look of someone who had spent a life parsing other people's consequences. He spread one of my invoices under his lamp and nodded as if reading the bones of a story he had heard many times. "Possession in fact," he said slowly, like a prayer. "You have habit, use, payment, maintenance. We can argue that the transfer was not meant to strip you of the daily control. And we can allege manipulation." Manipulation? The voice I used when the soup was too hot came out then, small and precise. "How do you prove what they felt?" "How do you prove what I felt?" "Not what they felt," Javier corrected. "What they did. Documents. Witnesses. Flow of money. The notary file. The timeline. We build a narrative they cannot deny without perjuring themselves." He pointed to a yellowed receipt with my name on it and the date. "You paid this. You fixed that. You were the actor." His fingers tapped the paper. We must be methodical. Kalei, mas neo skc. The phrase sat in my mouth like a stone I had wrapped in cloth. I had been silent, that was what made it true. I called Mr. Ramirez because fear had edges and needed to be seen. He was the buyer, the man who had agreed to take the house and my life away with a neat contract. His office smelled of air conditioning and the kind of polished steel that does not know what hands feel. I said only the facts. The property you are buying is involved in a legal dispute, I told him. My voice did not tremble. You could be part of a long litigation. Ma'am, he replied, irritated, in a voice that suggested other investments were more important than a grandmother's kitchen. We already have a contract. I understand, I said. But I have filed a challenge. I will fight. The money on the table will not buy certainty. It will buy a headache. I left him with the idea that his name might become a footnote in a courtroom story. Fear is contagious, and businessmen like certainty more than profit sometimes. In the nights that followed, I practiced how to speak without weeping. Javier taught me the words that would hurt less in public. We request an injunction, we allege undue influence, we request a measure cautelar. Language is power. Saying it gave me armor. I used my hands to fold the armor into folders. I also did small, practical things that felt like closing wounds. I photocopied everything double copies, in case one set vanished. I wrote dates in the margins of receipts. I filmed myself cooking short clips, hands at the comal, the heat on my face, the rhythm of my knife. Those videos felt like a stubborn record. I had been the one who made the food people missed. I slid those clips onto a USB and put it in the folder where the receipts lived. There were embarrassments to handle. I had to tell friends I could not lend money that month. I had to refuse a client's request for catering on credit. Saying no felt foreign. I had spent my life saying yes. Those small refusals were lessons in a new dignity. I would help them, but not at the cost of my home. At night, I rehearsed the conversation I would have at the kitchen table. I said the words out loud until they felt believable. You sold my house, I practiced. You sold my life. Let the words be measured, I told myself. Let the pain be steady. The nephews Helena found were sons of the street. Young, strong, with the kind of hands that know how to lift and then let go. We met in the early light and changed the locks on the shop front too. The register sits heavy, it is metal and memory. I kept the key to that one myself. That simple act, metal in my hand, felt like keeping a pulse. A neighbor asked on the sidewalk, in a voice like a small breeze, "What are you doing, Gabriela?" I told him the truth, preparing. Not running. He nodded as if that clarified everything, and went on his way with a bag of bread. People take steps with you or they don't. The ones who stay are the ones who matter. The more I prepared, the more the daily life of the fonda carried on. Customers arrived with the small daily confessions of hunger and gossip. Rogelio came and sat exactly at the same stool as he always had. "Your mole," he said, "even anger tastes like home." The sound of the bell over the door became a metronome that kept the grief from splintering me. Work saved me in the most literal sense. Between the stacks of paper and the clatter of plates I found other evidence less official but no less powerful. A photograph of Miguel at his graduation with my smile behind him, my face shadowed but proud, told a story of nights I had been awake stitching uniforms. A note in Lucia's handwriting thanking me for everything had been folded and tucked into the recipe book. It was proof that love had once been visible in ink. These were not legal instruments, but they sharpened the moral contour of my case. At one point, I went to the registry office to pull the original deed copies. The clerk who knew me took my hand briefly. We keep the records, she said. But we do not keep the heart. Her words rubbed salt and then an unusual kind of balm at once. Bureaucracy moves at a different speed. The files were thick and had seals and stamps and an old signature that trembled slightly, as if it had been made under the weight of a different need. Javier and I strategized like two chess players with different stakes. He explained the timelines. A measure coddler can stop transactions for months. A denuncia for patrimonial abuse can initiate an investigation. We must pin the legal pins where they will hurt their plan the most, he said. His hands shaped invisible arrows on the table. We target the buyer's willingness to proceed. We target the notary. We use the paper trail. Will they fight? I asked. They will, because they think money owns the day, he said. But you have time on your side if we move smart. I taped a piece of paper to the inside of the cupboard above the sink. On it, in my scrawl, I wrote, I will not be erased. It was small and private and I read it to myself every morning like a vow. It became my rhythm. I will not be erased. It was a hammer and a prayer. My children noticed a change. They called less. Miguel's voice sounded less like a son and more like a man measuring risk. Lucia's texts came with platitudes. Daniel stopped dropping by early in the morning, as if avoiding the stubborn light in which things look most true. They were not yet the enemy in full, only their plans had hardened into something cold. Confrontation loomed like weather. At night I sat on the stoop and learned to watch the street. I watched teenagers kick a ball, couples arguing softly on the corner, the old dog that belonged to nobody but crossed every yard like it remembered a route. The world continued. That was both cruelty and comfort. The street was indifferent to what I had lost and what I would protect. One afternoon a woman I had once given a job to, the young woman who had learned how to roast peppers beside me, came and placed a small envelope on the counter. For you, she said simply. Inside were signatures, customers, a neighbor, the supplier. We remember, the envelope said without words. It felt like a collective hand offered to steady mine. I also began to anticipate their moves. I called the bank and placed alerts on accounts connected to the property. I asked for copies of any payments made by third parties that might show an invisible flow of money. Small technical things like account numbers and dates feel dry when you say them, but they are teeth in a jaw that can break a plan. There were nights when doubt crept in. I would sit with a cup of coffee and turn the contract over and over. The signatures were clear. My name was there. I had signed. But legal forms are like doors, they must be opened with intent. Intent had been blurred by trust and advice 10 years ago. My signature had been made in a different trust, a different need. That is what made it possible for them to twist the document into a weapon. I reached out quietly to a woman named Estella whose daughter had once faced something similar. Estella's voice was slow and careful. She had a way of naming danger without melodrama. Organize, she said. You collect small things and they become a mountain. That sentence became a guide. Small things. Receipts. Witnesses. A changed lock. A note taped inside a cupboard. Mountains are made of small stones. At last we sent the letters Javier prepared. 2 to the workplaces of the children, 1 to the buyer, 1 to the notary, and a formal complaint to the Fiscalia Especializada. The measure cautelar was filed. The legal wheels began to turn with their peculiar, relentless sound. There was no satisfaction in it, only the progress of a machine designed to make messy things orderly again. The day before the confrontation I made coffee and pan dulce. The smell filled the house as if to claim it. I placed the folder on the table where the light landed like a promise. I set 4 cups and waited for a time when I could be calm enough to speak and stubborn enough to enforce my words. I was not naive. I knew that paper and testimony do not always win against blood and names. But I had learned this: to be counted, you must keep counting. The kitchen table had the folder in the center, the sunlight catching its corner. Coffee steamed in the cups like a small truce. The pan dulce sat on a plate that had been with the family through births and funerals. Miguel's suit had the faint smell of perfume and cigarette smoke that says you come from outside and prefer to stay outside. He sat and folded his hands the way people fold their arguments into manageable shapes. Lucia's fingers worried at the necklace she never takes off. Daniel's leg bounced like a mistake rehearsing itself. The room held them like a net. "I know why you're here," I began. My throat felt as if I had swallowed hot oil. I set the folder on the table, my hands steady, because I had done the work to make them so. "But you need to listen first." Miguel's face tightened in the way it always had when numbers outranked people. "We already told you, Mama. It's for your own good." "It was not for my good to be sold out of my life," I said. The words were short and they landed like coins. I did the taxes, I paid the repairs, I cooked the meals, I ran the fonda every day. I was not consulted. I will not be moved like furniture. Lucia tried the soft voice. "We only want the best for you. A residencia is safer. You will have doctors and activities. You think your preference for cleanliness is the best?" I asked. "You think taking away my kitchen will fix what you owe yourself? How long did you think I would be some expense to arrange?" The question hit one of them in a place that did not have words. "Kalei, mas neo skc." The small sentence I had been saying to myself now cut the room like a blade. It was a rhythm beating out of a heart that had been kept busy for decades. I could feel their discomfort like a heat. I opened the folder. Receipts spilled like small proof. Photos, me in front of the fonda, hands flour dusted, the license in my name from years of doing the paperwork, messages from suppliers that referenced me as the owner of the account, a video of me calling out a regular by name. I placed each piece with the ritual of someone who knows what matters. "This is you washing the uniform of Miguel when he was small," I said, and quietly slid the graduation photo across the table. "This is me paying the plumber. These are the bank transfers for goods. These are neighbors who will sign statements. This is the invoice for the new stove I bought with my own money. This is the payroll I handled." Miguel's mouth opened then closed like a drawer that won't stay shut. "That doesn't change the law," he said. "The property is in our names." Possession of fact, Javier had told me. "You have proof of continuous control. You did not cede the management." I heard the legal language now not as an instrument but as a truth the children couldn't practice. I was before them not only as a mother but as the person who had run a business and home, and who had, by hand and habit, kept them both alive. "How can you do this?" Lucia asked, and in the question was an echo of something, maybe shame. "Mom, it's the right thing." "Right for whom?" I replied. "Right for the people who are already sitting in the truck with boxes that have my things in them." Daniel shifted and tried to look like someone who had been misunderstood. "We were saving you from complications. From decreases." His voice had an urgency that sounded like a plea and a ledger at once. "Complications for you," I said. "Not for me." There was a long silence. Outside, a bus coughed and went on. The flatware on the sideboard caught the light in small glints as if the house had decided to keep showing me what I had built. Then Miguel grew impatient and the calm edge left him. "If you could stop being dramatic," he said, "this would all be easier. Legally, it's clean. All signatures are there. The money is ready. I picked up the sale contract with my hands and read it like a recipe. I read the clause that said rubication de la madre 30%, as if they had tried to make a guffaw of mercy out of a shovel. The numbers were clinical, the distribution cold. The clause smelled of a balance sheet that did not understand what a home is. You're giving me 30% to move, I said. 30% of 3 million pesos. For what? A room with a bed and someone else's schedule? And I'm supposed to sign away years I worked? My fingers trembled on the paper, but not from fear. The tremor was something else, weariness into action. Lucia placed a hand on the table. We could make it easier. We're not monsters. Are you? I asked, and the question was small but sharp. Because monsters do not bring boxes when they mean kindness. Monsters take without caring what they take from. The table produced a sound like a small fissure. Miguel looked at me, not with the son I knew, but with a man who had decided the arithmetic of family was his currency. Javier had taught me another tactic for the table: offer options, set terms, make the choice there's under light. I proposed a solution, I said, voice even. We take this to proper form. The house returns to my name. The business remains under my control. You may receive your inheritance when I die, as I always intended. If you need money now, we will look for proper loans or partial sales that do not evict me. We will do things with transparency. You're making this difficult, Miguel said, but his voice had lost the pitch of certainty. He had assumed that legal form would suffice. He had not expected the war of papers and neighbors. Daniel, younger and perhaps less hardened, looked at me with something like pleading. We can make different arrangements. We can. No. I said it clean and absolute. No arrangements that make me invisible. He swallowed. What about our debts? He asked, the raw truth of motive on his face. This is not a cash machine, I replied. You made choices. You must face them. I will help, within reason. I will not be erased to pay for your mistakes. My voice was steady. I had learned to be firm without anger that burned me. Lucia's eyes filled. We thought we were doing what was best, she whispered. For you, I answered. Not for me. There was a sting in the silence, like steam from the pot. Some things cannot be mended with words. Some things must be set into different shapes and then left to cool. I showed them the letters Javier had sent to their workplaces, to the buyer, to the notary. The faces of my children went from defensiveness to pale surprise as they read the consequences of a plan cast in haste. The buyer, Mr. Ramirez, had been warned. The notary's office had been queried. The measure cautelar was in motion. The legal net had been cast and already begun to tighten. Miguel's hands found the contract and began to fold it back into itself. You can't do this, he said, and the sentence was less of a threat and more of an admission. We already did, I replied. There was a moment of furious bargaining, a plea for time, a quiet threat about the difficulty of being estranged from a mother who could make life financially difficult. They threatened reputations, called upon the mercy they assumed lay like interest in their favor. I watched them and felt the seam of the family stretch. Javier arrived mid-morning like an old general who walks into a field he has planned. He sat and spoke the language that had turned my scattered panic into a plan. He explained the measure cautelar clearly. If the judge sees the prima facie evidence of manipulation or abuse, he can suspend the transaction. The buyer may withdraw. The sale cannot proceed until this is resolved, he said. And while the injunction is in place, anything they do to remove you could be considered coercive. He used legal words, and they landed like barriers. Miguel retorted with lawyer's jargon he had learned like a new suit. It's already done, he kept saying, as if repeating it could gild the lie. Javier replied with a quiet legal patience that made the room feel like a courtroom even before a judge made it so. I asked for their honest faces. Did you think of me as a thing you— Lucia cried quietly into a napkin and said, I'm sorry, in a way that sounded like she'd practiced the words. Daniel busied himself with taking a box back to the truck and lingered to help me clear a plate. You can win and still lose. That sentence sat in the doorway of the house. I had defended my home and my life, but the threads that had held us were frayed beyond easy repair. The children left with the truck less heavy and the house lighter in a way I had not expected. After they left, the room felt enormous and small at once. The folders sat open on the table like a medal I did not want to wear. Javier closed the file gently and looked at me with the softness of someone who had seen too many families become places of law. You did right, he said. But be aware. This changes everything. It already has, I replied. My voice was small and the truth inside it was larger than the words. The light through the window had shifted. The house hummed something like a lullaby and a siren together. Neighbors came by in the following days with casseroles and looks that carried gossip and support in equal measures. I felt the caution of people who love one of their own but do not want to be asked to take a side in an argument that smells like money. Some said nothing, some said everything, and all of it pressed against the wound, tender and human. The Fonda's register still clicked. Plates still arrived hot at the table. Rogelio nodded at me like a small island of continuity. Work filled the hours and made me useful to the world in a way that was not only domestic but civic. The customers needed me the way I needed to continue being known. At night, I sat on the step and watched the street the way a person watches weather, learning the patterns, waiting for the unpredictable. I had a folder of signatures, a file of receipts, a set of legal letters. I had a measure coddler on paper that looked like a shield. I had, for now, my house. But things were not the same. The ache of betrayal had a sharpness that did not dull easily. There were dinners that would never happen the same way. There were future birthdays that would taste of silence and propriety rather than warmth. I had won the right to stay, but belonging had shifted. The day closed like a small book. I turned off the lights in the fonda and counted the last bills like a priest counting beads. The mesadora creaked and remembered lullabies. I sat, and in the quiet a thought arrived like a small flame. Being strong does not mean you are unhurt. It means you accept the hurt and go on. Tomorrow I would continue to keep the books, sweep the floor, and take orders with the voice that knows how to be kind but not weak. The legal battle might resume. There might be appeals, tests, more letters. But I had shown a certain truth, would not be erased. The house, the plates, the memories, they remained. As I closed the shutters, a small corner of the contract still lay on the table, a reminder of what had been attempted. I touched it and felt that the home was more than brick and paper. It was labor held and names fed and years of small consistent acts. That, perhaps, was the hardest thing for them to calculate. When I prepared myself for bed that night, I found that sleep did not come easily. The mind makes lists in the dark, and mine was full of steps. Follow up with Javier, meet the buyer's lawyer, contact the notary, arrange for the deeds to be re-registered. I had to keep acting, because action is the way the world becomes a stable place again after it trembles. Before I slept I whispered a line I had begun to say months ago and now owned as a weapon and a prayer: I will not be erased. But the house had listened and would remember the day differently than the children did. Tomorrow, things would be different in the way that matters. They would have to live with the consequences of what they had done. And I would have to learn to live with the consequences of keeping my life. 6 months folded into ordinary days like bread being pressed into a pan. The house stayed under my name and the fonda kept its rhythm. The register's bell chimed with the same little song and customers came in, sometimes with faces that were new and sometimes with the familiar ones that made me feel like continuity was possible. I taught a young woman how to roast chiles until her hands were as steady as mine. The job gave me a reason to rise beyond grief. The legal papers were settled enough, at least, to make a clean line on the record. The deed had been re-registered in my name. The notary was careful in future dealings where my signature mattered. There is a kind of wary respect from institutions once you've pressed them with proof. The buyer had withdrawn when told the sale was entangled in court. The measure coddler had done its job. It created time and made haste a poor advice. Javier visited less frequently now. When he came, he sat in the living room and would talk slowly about small items like follow-up filings and estate planning. He guided me in writing a testamento that said what I wanted it to say. It felt strange and necessary to translate a life into legal language, but it was practical and calmed the parts of me that had learned to prepare. "You're not a file," he said once in that quiet way he had. "But the law is paper. We use it to organize justice. You did the right thing to gather your life into paper." I thought often about the price. The relationship with my children had rearranged itself into a different furniture. Miguel came every 2 weeks for lunch and stayed a little stiff, like someone trying to wear a shirt that didn't belong to him. He called sometimes, short sentences, cautious. Lucia rang for birthday notes for the grandchildren and asked about recipes. She avoided the past like a bruise that has to be pointed at in the light to heal. Daniel was more present in small ways, helping with the license renewals at the fonda on Saturdays, showing up to collect inventory, but even his help had a new edge, a mixture of guilt and effort. They all tried, in their own ways, to repair what had been broken. I could see the truth they had been forced to face, that money can buy many things but not the warmth of the hands that made you. Some days I found that I could forgive small things more easily. The big things, trust, the sense of being honored, took longer. Wounds suture, but the scar remains. Neighbors watched us like a slow weather. Some, like Estella, nodded when she saw me and brought a jar of her quince paste. Others kept a measured distance, unsure how to cross the space between empathy and curiosity. Helena came each week to gossip in safe, sharp sentences. "You kept your house, Gabriela," she would say, and then they would both laugh in the way that let sorrow stretch without breaking. The papeleria remained a place where documents and confidences were exchanged. At night, when the kitchen lights threw the same comfortable reflection on the tiles, I would sometimes open the drawer where I kept the contract and the old photograph of Miguel. I would look at that snapshot, the smaller Miguel with the mortarboard, my smile behind him, and I would remember the nights of sewing and the mornings of tamales. Memory is not only pain, it is evidence of what has been lived. There were days I caught myself being proud. When a regular complimented the stew and said, "Your mother would be proud," I felt something inside me lift. I was more than the conflict now. I was the woman who had lived through the story and continued to prepare food that people relied upon. I had kept my dignity, and sometimes that felt like a small victory, sauce ladled over a tough piece of meat. I also made practical changes. I formalized the books, hired a young woman to handle the afternoon shift so my feet would not carry the constant ache of standing for hours. I put the stove receipt in a frame with a note beneath, paid in full by hands that fed 3 children. It was a quiet declaration for anyone who watched. The grandchildren began to visit with a new cadence. They came to see the abuela who told stories with spice. Their laughter filled the corners where other voices had been quieter. When they wrapped their small fists around my fingers, there was the clean sensation of belonging. I taught them to fold tortillas and to respect bread. These were the things that mattered, that stitched the home back into a place of life rather than litigation. There were afternoons when the ache returned. A certain song on the radio would remind me of a Sunday that no longer existed, and tears would come like a sudden rain. But the tears were not always the same as the ones before. They were threaded with the knowledge that I had defended myself and had asked for help to do it. The answer to pain is not always victory. Sometimes it is. These are fragile stitches. They can hold if we care for them. I began to tell the story not like a wound but like a lesson. When neighbors asked, I'd explain, keep your papers, change your locks when necessary, take witnesses seriously. I would watch younger women who ran small businesses and share with them the practical things about how to make a life legible: receipts, licenses, witnesses. The lessons came from a hard place, but they were useful and they spread like seeds. One afternoon a woman sat at my table and said, "My sister went through the same," and told me about a case in a town 2 streets over. She asked for advice, and I offered what I had learned: organize the evidence, call someone you trust, keep a record of who pays for what. The community learned from one another. Small defenses became shared knowledge. At times, I looked at my own face in the mirror and didn't immediately recognize the woman who had always been the background in her children's photos. I had become a person who knew the legal vocabulary as well as she knew the recipes. There was a strange power in that. I had always been resourceful. Now I was also experienced in safeguarding. Javier came to help me with a small administrative task once, and we spoke of what happens when the ones you love betray you. People do what they think they must to survive, he said. But survival is not an excuse for erasure. No, I replied. And sometimes surviving means making your survival visible. He nodded. You made it visible. In the months that followed, life settled into a quieter urgency. I was more vigilant, yes, but also more at peace in a strange way. The house remained my place. The fonda fed the neighborhood. My hands still smelled of chili and oil and the small honest work of feeding people. And when the wind blew holding the scent of the mercados, would step outside and watch the street and feel rooted. There is a question I ask myself sometimes, when the kitchen is full and laughter rises and the grandchildren reach for my apron. Would I do it again? The answer is immediate and clear. Yes. I would fight. I would stand in the light and say the true thing. I would not let my life be parceled into someone else's ledger. Now I speak directly to you who are listening. Have you ever been made invisible by the people you loved most? Have they ever mistaken your generosity for weakness? Tell me in the comments where you are, what city, what country. Share the story that makes you feel less alone. For those who stay, let's build the small defenses together. If you stayed with me to the end, thank you. If this story touches you, subscribe to hear more stories of people who found a way to keep their dignity. Leave a comment below with the city where you live and one small thing you would never give up. We are building a place where dignity is not negotiable. I did not choose to make an enemy of my children. I chose to protect the life I had earned. The pain of that choice will always be part of me. But so will the strength I found. And in my kitchen, in the quiet before the morning rush, I still whisper it like a prayer: I will not be erased. What would you do if your life was offered as someone's shortcut?